All right, it's a Friday night. Usually I have Ted Gerard here tonight. And Brent, you have not met Ted Gerard, but he's a colleague at UNLV, focuses on sports medicine. And I hope at one point we can bring you back and have him part of this conversation because he's going to miss out. This is going to be a lot of fun talking with our guest tonight, Dr. Brent Ruby from University of Montana. Hey, Brent, how's it going?
Very good. Thanks for having me.
It is great. And boy, I tell you, I got to just give a little background for the people listening. Is one, you and I crossed paths back in the mid 90s when we were both in the Northwest region. And then obviously went our different academic paths. And I just recently reconnected with you because of your mobile lab that you've developed. And that's what I'm really interested in developing. And I've always kept sort of an eye on what you've been doing. And my goodness, I went back and checked out your Google Scholar profile today, and you have such a great collection of work that you've worked on over this the past, what, 20, 30 years now.
Almost 30, starting my 30th at the U this fall.
Oh my
So,
goodness, that's amazing. A blink of an eye. So I just wrote down a few key things that you've worked with, and I just love this. You've worked with Race Across America.
mhm.
You've done triathlon work, and we're going to talk a bit about that. You've done your own biopsy. I want to really get into that. You've worked on 24-hour mountain biking racing. You've worked on dog sled, paddle boarding, spacesuits, and nutrition, something along that. And yeah, obviously, you're still doing work with fire. It's not firefighters. What do we?
Yeah, wildland fire crews.
Wildlife fires. Yep. And then you've done soccer, basketball, military performance. You've done core temperature, energy expenditure. You've done just such a wide range. And I love this. It is so impressive to see all the work that you've done. It's really great. But maybe for everyone listening, maybe give a little bit of your academic path. How did you get to where you are right now?
Oh man, yeah. So I was a graduate student. Well, I was first an undergrad student in Seattle at Seattle Pacific University and was a cross country and track athlete there. My junior year there, a friend of mine and I decided, hey, we should sign up for the Canadian Ironman. This is back in 1988.
Oh my goodness.
Back when you could send in $100
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
just be in. So
Oh, and that was
yeah,
Penticton.
that was in Penticton,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
And then after I graduated from Seattle, I went to the University of New Mexico, and I was there for almost 5 years to the day,
Yeah.
finishing. I did both my master's and my PhD stuff there. But I remember my advisor, one of my main advisors, was constantly trying to make me focus
Hmm.
on a particular area. And he would say, it's going to be best if you hone in on one area and really make that your specialty.
Hmm.
And I have refused ever since. So yeah, so I when I came to Montana, there was really no lab. I had to start everything from scratch, which was tricky with my wife Joe and I. We didn't, it was just the two of us, and then it was more of us, and we had two kids. They grew up here. We've lived in the same house the whole time in Missoula for almost 30 years. And yeah, it's a blink of an eye.
Oh, that's great. I love it.
Yeah.
And all right, so Ironman Penticton, that wasn't your first triathlon, was it?
That was not my first. I had done a number of other races over the years prior to that,
Hmm.
starting about 85.
Okay.
And then just decided on a whim to do that. I didn't do another Ironman until 2005,
Okay.
but I
And
did a lot of other racing,
yeah.
bike racing, and a lot of running and stuff like that in the mix. So
Okay. And I saw you've done Coeur d'Alene as well 3 times.
I have done Coeur d'Alene. Yeah, I qualified for Kona twice,
Yeah.
and once in 2006 and once in 2010
Yeah.
from Coeur d'Alene.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now, and I checked out your Kona results too. That's awesome. Well, so you've really been in
The
this.
second one was a tanker. I had a torn meniscus.
Oh no.
Yeah,
Oh,
but the 2006 race was decent.
Yeah,
A
yeah.
little bit slower than I had hoped for, but that's okay.
Yeah. Yeah, Kona has a way of just punishing any weakness, right? Uh,
Hard to acclimatize when you're in the Northwest.
yeah, that's
That's
true,
for sure.
totally. But it's
Yeah.
interesting, you've done a lot of work in all different areas that are related to endurance performance, and from just different sports to different perspectives and a wide range of approaches. And so it's really neat how you've sort of taken this interdisciplinary approach. But I was talking with Jim Martin, who was our guest last week, and I told him that you were going to be on this week, and he goes, "Oh yeah, some Brent was doing some triathlon work, and he was doing muscle biopsies and on himself." I said, "Oh, I got to ask him about that." So I don't know if everyone knows what a muscle biopsy is. So maybe describe that procedure and what were you doing that you had to do your own muscle biopsy?
Yeah. So it's a pretty routine methodology. We use it all the time to capture muscle samples for glycogen or any of, if we're looking at gene response or whatever. And it's a pretty quick procedure, and the target is usually giant. I mean,
Hmm.
hitting the vastus lateralis is a lot easier in some ways than hitting a small arm vein. But yeah, so we've done them a lot. We've done them all over the place in different field settings. We've taken samples from fire crews before and after a shift. But in 2005, we were hoping to do a pilot study at Ironman, but I didn't qualify.
Hmm.
And we figured it would be difficult to convince just anybody to say, hey, good job qualifying for Kona. Can we take some muscle before and after the race? And so we decided, well, I'll just do it on my leg if I qualify. Well, I didn't qualify in 2005. And so we pivoted and went to a half Ironman in the state of Washington.
Okay.
And we wanted to, in just sort of a case study format, we wanted to get a biopsy before the race, right after the race, and then 4 hours later to look at resynthesis,
Hmm.
and compare that to all these resynthesis studies that we done in the lab under real controlled conditions. So the person that was collaborating with me at the time was at Appalachia State University. His name's Chuck Dumke. He's now at Montana.
Yeah.
But so Chuck came out to do the biopsies on me before and after, and then the 4 hours. Right around the time after the race was over, he's like, I got my flight information messed up. I have to leave in like an hour to go to the airport. And it was a ways away from the airport in like Spokane or something like that.
Yeah.
And so I thought, well, we have to do the 4 hour post biopsy. How are we going to pull that off? And he goes, well, you should just take it on yourself. You can probably do that. I'm like, what? This is spoken from a guy who's never actually had one done on himself, let alone done one on himself. So I thought, well, that's not too bad of an idea. So while he was there, I prepped the leg. I made the incision, and then I just put a steri strip over it and a patch over it and wrapped it real good so it was ready.
Yeah.
And then came time to do the biopsy, I just sat there with my legs straight out in front of me. Someone's sitting behind me in case I got woozy, and then put a fenestrated, just a sterile drape over my leg with a hole in it, which kind of disconnected me from the whole scene.
Yeah.
And put the lidocaine in, put the needle in, boom, boom, done. And it was really no big deal. Put a single stitch in it and good to go.
Oh.
Funniest part about it,
You stitched yourself up too.
yeah, one
Oh,
stitch.
yeah.
Yeah. But one of the funniest part of it is my daughter was, I don't know how old she was at that time, maybe like 10 or 11. And she went with us for that project, and she's taking pictures the whole time.
Oh,
Yeah, so that's the one time I've done that.
oh my gosh. Now, wait a second. How big is this needle though?
It's about 5 millimeters
Yeah.
in diameter, so it's like a small clicky pencil.
Yeah, yeah, that's what I was thinking. It's like, yeah, you're talking about this like nonchalantly. I just put a needle in, but you're talking about putting a pencil in your thigh and pulling that muscle out.
Yeah,
Oh my goodness.
it
Oh,
wasn't too bad, but
hey,
that was a fun project.
In the name of science.
Yeah. And then the following year, I did qualify for Kona at 2006 at Coeur d'Alene. And we went to Kona for the race and we took samples before and after the race from my leg to look at the same
Yeah.
parameters in that during the event.
Mm.
So, yeah.
Oh, that's so cool. So that's cool.
Might be the only one. I don't know if anybody else has ever done Kona with biopsy before and a biopsy after.
I don't think so. I've not heard anyone else who has done that. I love it. Well, and so you've done a lot of this work on muscle biopsy and muscle physiology, but you've also done a lot of work in essence, energy expenditure during a wide variety of tasks. What are some sort of take-home messages that you've learned over the years on endurance sports and energy expenditure?
Yeah, so I started using a tracer methodology called doubly labeled water back in the mid 90s when I was doing some work with wildland fire crews. And we wanted to measure the total energy demands, megajoules per day or kilocalories per day, 24-hour period on a fire assignment to make sure that we were then paving the way for good dietary choices during their operations, which are typically 14 days in a row.
Okay.
So we deployed that technique in that setting, which was really cool because that's a super unpredictable world. You don't know when it's going to start. You don't know. It's not like a race where you know when the gun's going to go off. So it was a little bit of a challenge to deploy it in that method or in that setting. But then after that, I started looking around for other situations that we could use this technique in that would really try and highlight some big human energy expenditure tasks. And so one of the first ones was Ironman in Kona. Mm-hmm. And so we did that in 2005 was the first year we did that. And a graduate student and I went to Kona to do that study. And I think we accumulated 3 or 4 people. The next year we did the study with my leg, and then I took the tracer, we added to it. And then the year after we added a few more subjects. So we got a decent sample size of both men and women. And essentially the bottom line is Kona costs about 9,000 calories as far as an energy expenditure. Okay. Now there's in any of these ultras, there's no way you can hope to eat that much, but it puts a line in the sand that says, okay, here's the total energy demand. Then you can back up from that and think what's realistic as far as dietary intake. But we've also used that same technique during the Western States 100. And those are some of the highest, if not the highest, measures in humans in the literature. And that averages about 16,000 calories in 24 hours. Wow. So it's about a 24-hour race. But the other neat measurement that comes along with that technique is it allows you to calculate how much of the total body water is turned over, what that flux is, how much is lost and how much is put back, because you're just looking at the dilution of this tracer in the urine. And that to me is one of the neatest measurements. So at Ironman, it's anywhere from about 12 to 16 liters in that 12-hour about window. The Western States is considerably higher in the mid 20s in 24 hours.
That's amazing.
And the Badwater race in Death Valley, which is 132 miles or something like that, that water turnover is the ugliest on the planet. And that's just over 32 liters in about 30 hours.
Oh my goodness.
And the crazy thing about all of those situations is before and after, the blood metrics for like serum sodium are virtually unchanged.
Really?
To me, it's such cool data because it doesn't really provide, it provides some information to the average racer on what they can expect. But to me, it showcases this outlandish level of turnover
Mm-hmm.
in a human when we were put together millions of years ago. Like, why in the world would we ever need that capability?
Mm-hmm.
Back then, if you attempted to do any event like that, you would die, because there's no way you had access to all the food and fluid that
Right.
is so limiting.
Mm.
And these modern day events sort of paved the way for us to recognize or realize some of this crazy, huge underlying physiology, which is kind of fun to see. So we've also done other 24-hour races. We did a 24-hour mountain bike racer and a pro mountain biker a few years back. And I mean, those numbers are like 9,000 or a little bit more in that 24-hour window. So it's a really neat technique, because for military operations or like fire, it really sets the stage for helping us understand how we need to feed these people better.
Yeah.
Because in the racer, it's just intriguing because the numbers are so huge. So,
Mm.
but
Oh,
for a 24-hour racer, knowing that value really helps them, really helps sort of set the stage on what they can practically consume. It takes a little bit of trial and error out of the equation.
mm-hmm. Those are some amazing numbers. And so I'm
Yeah,
curious, are these athletes, are they losing weight over the, obviously they're losing some weight, or how are they able to replace this magnitude of calories and or fluid,
yeah.
or can they?
The 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 nutrient is definitely out of balance.
Hmm.
So the expenditure far outweighs the ability to consume that much
Hmm.
in a 12 to 24-hour event. With the fire crews that are expending 4,000 to 6,000 calories a day for 5, 6, 7 days at a time,
Hmm.
that's where the nutrient balance is very critical,
Yeah.
because it's not like a one and done with a race number. They're going to be out there for 14 days. So they really have to be careful about making sure they maintain energy balance. And they do a pretty darn good job of it. But
Hmm.
the racers in these situations, no, they go into a hole, lose a little bit of weight, pound here, pound there, not that dramatic, but the blood levels of sodium stay normal, and they do a really good job of maintaining fluid levels and total body water, which is shocking.
Hmm. Do
And
you
they're
think,
not running around with a scale
yeah.
measuring themselves to make sure they're consuming enough and measuring things with a
Oh,
graduated cylinder. It's not, they're all ad lib and they're just doing fine.
wow. That's
So
amazing.
yeah.
So do you think that this is trainable, or is it something that maybe is innate to certain athletes, or?
I think it's definitely trainable in the sense of from the perspective of people need to be trained to learn to make good decisions
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah.
and listen and recognize that thirst is there for a reason and the kidneys are there for a reason,
No.
and all the marketing out there that says, oh my gosh, you athletes are so dumb, there's no way you can possibly make these smart choices by yourself. You need to buy this product, buy this device, consult with this
Mhm.
person, do these calculations. For goodness sakes, at least have a spreadsheet. Like it makes the athlete who oftentimes I feel I argue with the classic sport nutrition person that thinks they know better, and it's like the only way you might know better than that athlete is if you yourself have put yourself in their shoes, done that over and over and over,
Mhm.
because those athletes are a case study N of one
Mhm.
over and over, and they're constantly refining, perfecting.
Mhm.
So I never discount the capability of an athlete. I always tell the firefighters that they're far more calibrated than the instrumentation that we put on them,
Mm.
to figuring out what to consume and how much to consume during the day.
Oh, I love that. Yeah, it's so important because you're right. It is overwhelming. You know, you get all this, you get bombarded by all these ads on different types of product and how much
Yeah.
to take and how much to drink and where do you know, do solids, fluid. It's overwhelming.
And back in the old days, back in that early 1988 Ironman, there were none of these products.
No,
Power Bar just came out,
yeah, that's right.
but that wasn't available in the
Yeah.
course. If you brought those, you had to bring your own. But I ate 13 bananas on that damn bike ride. And after that race, for essentially the rest of my life, I can't eat bananas.
Yeah, yeah, right, right.
So, yeah,
Your brain
but
remembers.
it's shocking how many products are out there, and everybody says they've got the best and
Yeah.
whatever. It's not all the sport nutrition products out there. The regular food does just as good a job. We did a study a few years. Well, this is, oh gosh, maybe 10 years ago now, maybe not that long ago. But I was getting so fed up with that message that was persistent.
Hmm.
And so we did a muscle recovery study where we matched calorie for calorie, the post-exercise food sources. And we provided, in a repeated measure study, we provided all sport nutrition products,
Hmm.
blocks, bars, drinks, whatever. And we compared it to an assortment of menu items from McDonald's.
Mm.
And then we just looked at the muscle glycogen resynthesis
Oh,
and exercise performance, which was a 20K time trial at the end. And there was no difference between the two.
wow.
And so, oh man, I got a lot of heat for that project because people were suggesting that I was advocating for McDonald's. And I was like, no, I'm just advocating for regular food is viable.
Yeah.
Why'd you choose McDonald's? Well, it's a lot more fun to choose something so far on the other end of on the spectrum that if that works, then you can stack anything.
Yeah.
If you get enough carbohydrates, muscle doesn't care.
Oh,
Just,
that is such a great message. And it's funny because I know after races you hear a lot of people saying, "Well, I'm craving this or that," and the message is always like, "Go eat it."
yes, yeah,
It-
absolutely. If you're craving it, that's a good sign that you probably need it. That's
Yeah.
just like the thirst mechanism is brilliant.
Hmm.
It does a pretty darn good job.
Mm. Well, and it's interesting, you know, as you know, there's all these products out there like long chain, you know, carbohydrates, starchy, then you fructose and gluten, you know, maltodextrin, all this. So you're in essence saying if you can get it in, your body can use it.
Yeah, now that all of those studies that we've done are post-exercise refeeds.
Okay.
But some of the other stuff where they fine-tuned a balance of monosaccharides, like a balance of fructose and glucose,
Yeah.
you can, when you do that, and those studies are just so well done
Hmm.
with the methodology. Asker Jukendrup from England did some of those studies back in the day, and they're just brilliant studies because they show you how much of what you consume the muscle can actually oxidize.
Hmm.
And if you only consume glucose, you can get it up to about 60 or 75 grams an hour.
Yeah.
Whereas if you provide a balance and you train the gut
Hmm.
to essentially develop more receptors for
Hmm.
those monosaccharides, you can increase the muscle's ability to oxidize that take in exogenous carbohydrate up to about 100 to 120 grams an hour,
Yeah.
which is so high octane to
Hmm.
be able to do that.
Hmm.
So athletes, a lot of products have been developed around the concept of those monosaccharides
Hmm.
and a balance of those, which is really, really cool to see.
Yeah, it's amazing. I mean, there's athletes talking about trying to get 100 to 100 to 120 grams of carbohydrate in every hour, as you said.
Yeah.
That's a lot of carbohydrate.
Yeah. The problem with that for a lot of athletes is it's kind of like using a GPS running watch. If you go for a run on any given day, you have your go-to race pace or your go-to pace, and then all of a sudden you go to Kona and you're used to living in Missoula, Montana or wherever, and it's not that hot here, but it's hot in Kona. Well, you're looking at that Garmin and you're like, well, I should be running 730s or whatever. And you try to run 730s and it's like, this isn't going very good. But same thing for feeding. If you get in the practice of consuming big giant doses hourly in one environment, that's not going to work in the heat. Not at all. Because the blood flow to the gut is enormously shunted when you have to go into the heat compared to maybe a cooler environment that you're used to training in. And so you have to acclimatize a little bit before you can start to really upregulate the ability for your gut to accept that high dose of carbohydrate. So you might have to cut it in half.
Oh, wow.
And then gradually reintroduce it. So,
yeah, because that was going to be one of my next questions is how does the environment influence what
huge,
you are eating?
huge.
Yeah.
The environment also influences dramatically how fast the muscle can put glycogen back into the leg, which all those studies, all those resynthesis studies, there's a lot of classics, and they do a fine job of dialing in the perfect dose, 1.2, 1.5 grams per kilogram per hour for this and that. And so they develop these recommendations, and then those recommendations gets pushed forth in some position stand or whatever. But all bets are off if you have to recover in the heat. It doesn't work. It slows everything down. If you recover in the cold, it doesn't seem to influence anything. If you change the temperature of the muscle, if you make the muscle really cold, it will decrease the ability to recover that glycogen. If you increase the temperature of just the muscle that needs to be recovered, it'll upregulate the rate of resynthesis. So the temperature that the individual or the athlete decides to recover in is likely as important as dialing in the perfect dose, which sport nutritionists don't want to tell you that. They want to tell you the bottom line number. They don't think about the environment and how it plays a role, but it definitely it can throw a wrench in it big time.
Oh, that's great. And I guess another area that it could throw a wrench into things is male versus female.
Yeah. Yes, that is a complex, it is very complicated to try to do those studies. Going back to when I was a student in New Mexico, my doctoral research was with, it was a study on females looking at some mechanistic carbohydrate regulation due to estrogen. And how it affects how the liver dumps glucose into the blood and how it affects how well the muscle takes it up during exercise. But it's really difficult to design a study that says males should eat this many grams of carbohydrate per hour and females should eat this much. As soon as you go away from a lab controlled environment and a fasted state before the study, as soon as you introduce fed state, different environmental conditions, the fine possible effects that estrogen might exert on the muscle or the body fade way into the background.
Really?
And the environment, the intensity, the what's been dumped into the gut, those kind of come to the forefront. Now that's not what people that want to push an agenda that males are absolutely different than females in all ways of fuel use. That doesn't seem to be the case all the time. There's plenty of studies with multiple tracers that show the proportionate use of carbohydrate from the liver, from the muscle, from exogenous is not much different in males and females.
Hmm.
They may argue, well, you're not controlling for this phase of the cycle or this phase of the cycle. All that's great to understand mechanistically, but that's going to become a wash in the real world often.
Hmm. Well,
So,
and it speaks to how important it is as an individual to figure out what works. And you mentioned something like that before. And I think that's what's hard. And you even mentioned, back in '88, you could have bananas, but you can't have bananas now. So
yeah.
maybe another area to explore is what's the influence of age on energy expenditure and being able to take in fuels.
That's a great question because um, years ago when we decided to do that study with the Race Across America, my grad student who was going to crew this 4-man team, he said, Brent, what would you want to do an energy expenditure study with a 4-man team during the Race Across America? And I'm like, that's kind of cool, but it's been done before. Like there was just a paper recently with a 4-person team and they were like 7,000 calories a day. That's cool and everything, whatever. And he goes, well, the team I'm crewing, 4 guys, they're all over 70.
Oh, wow.
And I'm like, yes, we're doing that study.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So we worked with that 4-man team that was an over 70 team. And the year that we did it, so we used the same tracer methodology. The year that we did it, they won their age group. They set the record for their age group, but they also set the record for the age group before.
Wow.
And their energy expenditure metrics matched up almost exactly with the group that was studied previously from a different lab. And those 30 somethings.
Oh, interesting.
So same, like 6,000 to 7,000 calories a day ish for the duration, which was like 5 days and some change. Their finish time was almost the same, just a hair slower than those 30 somethings. And so in terms of big human energy expenditure, if the body stays trained enough to tolerate it, there's no difference. It didn't matter, which was really fun. Now you have to be a little bit careful because most of these studies are just descriptive studies, but you learn a lot when you take a snapshot of something in the real world.
Yeah.
And it's a different way. You learn something different versus we had an N of 12 and one trial they did this and the other trial they did that. And it was all in the lab. It's hard to translate those results externally to the real world athlete for sure.
Oh, I love it. So how has your research influenced what you do, either back when you were doing Ironman or triathlon in general, or what have you taken even from your work and said, I'm gonna do this differently because of what you know now?
Oh man. I think the one thing I've tried to push in trying to do things differently, maybe less of my own training habits or my own personal habits, but I've tried to push the idea that people and students shouldn't be terrified to step outside of the lab. There's some cool things that could be done if you step outside of the lab and explore a little bit. It's not always going to go well and you're going to break more stuff, but that to me that's sort of become one of my drivers within the field is that this constant need to spend some time in the lab, dial in the mechanism, and then move to the field. Does that hold water?
Yeah.
How does it fall apart or how does it change? And then we're also trying to uncover and learn different techniques that we can use in the field that allow us lab quality data outside of the lab. And everybody has high hopes for wearables as being the next great thing. Well, 90% of the wearables out there, 100% of the wearables out there have one thing in common. You can wear them, but 90% of them don't give you what they want to promise.
Yeah.
And so just slicing through that garbage and figuring out what works, what doesn't work, and that's a constant battle.
Oh,
But
totally. I feel your pain because, I've been following your footsteps, really, trying to move the lab outside.
yeah,
And it's hard. And especially when you start buying these wearables because you have to get through their proprietary software.
oh,
Whenever I talk with a company, I always just ask them, can you give me the raw data? And if the answer is no, I'm like, I'm not sure I can do any work with you because I can't work through the black box that you have in your system.
that's so true. That's so true. Back in the old days, it was so easy to just download heart rate minute by minute or whatever.
Yeah.
Now, even heart rate's hard to get.
Yep. 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 No,
But
there's a lot of,
it's almost like labs should hire data processing people that can build apps
yeah,
just to
yeah.
manage some of these wearables and dissect them and reverse engineer them so you can get the raw signals. That'd be sweet.
No, totally. I remember I was working with one wearable tech that did EMG. This would have been 15 years
Oh,
ago, and I got the data out, and it was all smooth. And I went to them. I said, "Oh, I really need the raw data." I said, "What's your smoothing algorithm?" And they're like, "Well, we're not too sure what it is, but it's probably around this." I said, "Well, I can't do anything with
that's not
this."
gonna work. Yeah.
So field work is tough. All right, so back to energy expenditure though. Something that you've looked at is really recovery. Well, what's the downfall, or I mean, this is easy to predict, but where you're going to go. But I'm really curious is, when you start accumulating, not eating enough or not recovering enough.
Yeah, when I think of recovery, um, I think almost exclusively of two things: repair
Hmm.
of damaged tissue and resynthesis of fuel that's been depleted.
Hmm.
And resynthesis of fuel that's been depleted is relatively easy to study, just with taking muscle samples immediately after and then feed them. And then 4 hours later, take another muscle sample and say, oh gosh, it went up this fast.
Hmm.
Those are, and the literature has been pretty good at standardizing this 4 hour recovery window as a way to sort of get a glimpse at the faster component of glycogen resynthesis. But we have to keep in mind, as relatively new researchers, that some of that glycogen recovery research was collected by Costel and his group back right around the time we were about to set foot on the moon for the first time.
Yeah, right.
So we're certainly not reinventing the wheel here. And that's what cracks me up with all these companies that crop up. And it's just like spokesperson, good looking person here and there. And this is the secret to better recovery. It's like, what do you mean by recovery?
Hmm.
Like, you're mentally ready to go. The muscle is refueled. You have gotten enough sleep. What do you? It's just this catchphrase that people just throw out there,
Hmm.
and they want to suggest that, oh, recovery means make sure you get all the lactate out of the muscle and make sure you massage the tissue with our slide on balloon leg things and you'll recover better.
Hmm.
If the goal is to be ready for the next day, one of the simplest things an athlete can do is to make good choices during the session that's going to require recovery from, and then make good nutritional decisions afterwards consistently. Get a good night's sleep and you'll be ready to go the next morning. It's not that complicated. But to me, recovery is mostly nutritional and fluid balance.
Hmm.
But
Oh, I love that. Yeah, I always think, I want to train as hard as I can today so I can train again tomorrow.
right.
Because that consistency of training is just so important, especially in endurance events.
Oh gosh, yeah. And also athletes, the trouble that a lot of Ironman athletes get themselves in is I feel good today, I'm going to go hard today.
Yeah.
When on the schedule, it suggests this should be an easy day. And it's really hard to put your ego to the side and just go easy when you're supposed to go easy, and pave the way for those 10% of your training volume hard days.
Yeah.
Focused, but
Oh, totally. And then that even would take us into trying to do a taper week, which is so stressful.
you know,
Because you want to
uh,
be training, you're used to training, and now all of a sudden you're tapering, and that's
yeah,
always easy.
I do remember that being, yeah, you'd be just crawling out of your skin because you're so anxious.
All right, so we're almost out of time. I'm curious, in all the work that you've done, when you look back, what's a study that you did that you said, or that you think, oh, that was really cool. I'm so glad we did that one.
In 2006, no, 2007, from 2006 to about 2008, we had a series of studies that were just like, we had a good grant from the Air Force that allowed us a lot of flexibility. And
Hmm.
so we were just grabbing at all these crazy models. That's when we did Ironman. That's when we did Western States, Badwater. And we organized this overtraining study that we called the Giro Discovery.
Hmm.
And we named it after the Giro, the bike race in Italy, but we named it Discovery after the core of Discovery, the Lewis and Clark expedition through the West.
Okay.
And it was an designed to be an overtraining study with 10 well-trained cyclists.
Hmm.
Took the cyclists from Missoula to Colorado and back in 21 days.
Mm.
So we put on about 2,200 miles in 21 days in these guys. And every third day was what we would start the day with what we called the hour of power, which was a 60-minute all-out time trial.
Mm.
Maintain the highest power output you can maintain for the hour.
Oh, wow.
And so that was when power meters were becoming more available.
Right.
And so every bike had a power tap. Everybody was outfitted with heart rate units. We used tracers to look at water turnover. We took muscle samples,
Hmm.
look at gene response over the course of this 21-day window. And that was absolutely one of the most fun and challenging studies,
Hmm.
because we could not overtrain these guys
Really?
using the classic
Uh,
markers that everyone says, oh, watch out for cortisol,
yeah.
watch out for the testosterone cortisol ratio, watch out for resting heart rate in the morning. All these things that people, they're like, these are markers of overtraining. And yet, if performance doesn't decay, but the markers go up, those are just markers. They're
Yeah.
not markers of overtraining, because
Mm.
overtraining's got to be, in my mind, it's got to be matched with the decay in performance. And
Mhm.
we could not overtrain them. We
Mm.
increased their training volume by 400%,
Mm.
and we could not overtrain them. And we're scratching our heads like, how come we can't? Some of the markers would change, but the performance wasn't going down.
Wow.
And I think the reason why we had a hard time overtraining them, or for them to drop in performance, is it was a blast for them. It wasn't, we took all of the external stressors
Yeah.
away.
Yeah.
They didn't have to cook their own meals. They didn't have to worry about
Hmm.
mowing the lawn or dealing with
Mm.
uh, social engagements or
Mhm.
whatever. All they did was sleep, eat, and ride their bikes
Wow.
and
Hmm.
have a blast with each other. So that was such a, there's a if you go onto YouTube, I think you can type in WPEM Giro Discovery, and there's like a 30 or 40-minute documentary
Yeah.
that we filmed during the whole study.
Yeah, I
So
think I
we
saw,
have,
I've seen at least parts of that because
yeah,
I recall the power tap shirts that they were wearing.
yeah. So that was probably one of my favorites over the years. a lot of those guys that were in that study have pestered me and said, when are we going to do Giro 2?
Oh, there you go.
Oh man, I don't know if we could ever pull that off again. That was just amazing effort. It was
Yeah.
so fun.
Yeah,
Yeah,
you must have had quite the team doing it. In fact, I remember the video, and you got a shirt afterwards, or they gave the team shirts, and that looked like a great bonding experience for sure.
I still am friends with and communicate with all of those guys that were in that study.
Oh, that's
Yeah,
awesome.
I'll see them around Missoula here or there or
Oh,
elsewhere. Yeah, everybody's got great memories of that one.
oh. Brent, this is so great talking with you. I mean, one, the level of knowledge that you have is fantastic, but I mean, just to hear your joy of talking about doing research and doing the science is really a lot of fun. So, thank you for jumping on this podcast.
Absolutely. My pleasure. It was super fun chatting with you.
All right, well, we'll catch up again soon. Talk soon.
All right.